disassemble our NES, which is fairly easy if you're not familiar with hardware and you're a little apprehensive about taking apart your NES. Never fear, it is really not a difficult job whatsoever. As long as you follow directions to the T, you don't get rushed, and you don't force anything. That's the most important thing, is to follow directions and don't force anything. So we're going to start off by unplugging our NES here. Connectors. Okay, we got no adapters, nothing plugged in, and no games inside the cartridge slot. You want to turn your NES in upside down, and if you'll notice here, you've got 6 holes on the outer edge of the NES unit. You got one in each corner. One in each corner, that's 4 of them. And then you got one right here in the middle on the bottom, one right here in the middle on the top. Okay? Don't worry about this cover, just leave it be. Just put your NES down on a flat surface. And I would also like to mention these screws. Once we take them out, I do have a couple of other additions to my toolkit here. I've got a marker, and I've also got some sandwich bags here, and I've labeled these. I've got 3 bags here, and each is labeled for a different portion of the NES that is being taken apart, and I will explain those as I'm taking this apart. So take your long neck screwdriver, Phillips head, and we can start in one of the corners. And take the screw out. It helps if you have a magnetic head on your screwdriver. So your screw comes right out there. Put it aside, make sure you can get to it in just a minute. Go to the opposite corner. Take out that screw. Take out the leftover screws in the corners. Then take out your screws on the top and bottom middle portions. Now, if you don't have a magnetic head on your screwdriver, just loosen all 6 of these screws, and then on a flat surface that will be able to catch all your screws, flip your NES upside down, put it down flat, and then lift it up, and you'll see all your screws have fallen out. Now, after all your screws are out, you should be able to lift up on the top portion of the NES like this, back and front. You should be able to lift the top portion right off of there. Set that aside. And what you've got here is, if you've got your NES game cartridge slot, spring-loaded one, that's exposed. And this metal shield here is called your RF shield. That shields against electrical discharge, and it acts as your ground for your main components inside this NES unit. So now that we've got our screws for our top portion out, we want to go ahead and put those in a plastic baggie here, or put those aside to where you know that these are for the top portion only. So I've got a plastic baggie here, and I've labeled it top main cover. And you don't necessarily have to do it this way. This is my method of keeping up with the screws. The last thing you want to do is start mixing up screws, because there are some screws within this NES that are different lengths that need to be put back in the same exact spot. So you need to keep up with those. Take these screws, dump them in my bag, and then shut the bag up and set that aside for later. Okay, we want to take our RF shield off now, and there are several screws here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 2 in the back, 6, and 7. You got 7 RF shield screws. So I'm going to start off by taking the 2 off in the back. The main cover screws are the same length, by the way. These RF shield screws are also all the same length. So these can go back in any which way you want them to. You just got to keep in mind, which we haven't gotten to it yet, of the longer screws while taking this unit apart. We get a screw, I'll show you right here by this metal post. A little dusty in this unit. Most of our units have been sitting in our garages or our attics for many years. These NESs are over 25 years old, and if you've taken good care of them, and if you take care of them now by refurbishing and cleaning them, you can bring it back to life and maybe allow these things to function for another 25 years. So you got your 1, 2, 3 screws on the right side, 2 screws in the back, and then 2 screws on the left side. Okay. Our RF shield just lifts right off very carefully. It should not get stuck. If it does get stuck, it may be just scraping against this metal post on the right hand side. Just carefully kind of lift from the left and up, straight up like that, and you shouldn't have any issues whatsoever. What we've got left is our NES cartridge slot, spring-loaded slot here, and the motherboard, which is underneath. So we're going to go ahead and take this cartridge slot off. You've got 2 screws in the front. We're going to go ahead and take those out. Alright, and we got 4 screws in the back. These middle screws here are the long screws that you want to take note of. These back screws, they are the same length as the front screws. We're going to go ahead and take out our middle screws. Now for our back screws. Okay. Those are out of there. Now we've got to take our cartridge slot out. So what you want to do is you've got to watch out for this little screw post right here on the front, this little plastic screw post. You're going to lift your slot up over that post and then pull forward and gently make sure there are no wires in the way. Make sure those are beneath your cartridge slot, and then gently move your way forward and it should pop right out. There you go. Put that aside. Your motherboard is disconnected from the rest of the case for the most part, except for 2 little screws. This portion right here is your RF box, and it's also your power supply, all combined into one. You got a screw right here in this corner, and you got a screw right here in this corner, right on the other side of this metal post. We're going to take out this screw first. Set it aside. Take out that screw next. Set it aside. Now the reason I like taking the board out of here, it's easier to work with, and you can also dust out your case. If you already have it open to this point, you might as well take the main board out and clean out the rest of the case, and just go all the way with this NES and then clean it, you know, from inside out. Do some detailed cleaning, and I'll show you how to do all that here in a moment. So now you can lift up very carefully. Now another thing I want to talk about is this main board here is just like your motherboard or any other component in your home PC. It uses a PCB board, which can be damaged by ESD, Electrostatic Discharge. Electrostatic discharge is caused by building up static electricity within your body, and then touching a component on here and discharging your static electricity on a component, thus damaging, potentially damaging the component itself. There's a lot of ROM chips on here, and those can be damaged during ESD. So the way you discharge yourself is find a nearby metal object, like we can use this RF shield here. Make sure your feet are grounded, make sure you're sitting down and you're not scooting back and forth or walking back and forth while you're doing this. Make sure you're completely grounded. Take your hand, touch the metal object, let go, you've been discharged. So that way when you touch the board, you're not discharging on the board, you're discharging on something else that can't be hurt in the process. So once you discharge ESD, you can handle your main board now. So you lift it up out of there, and you got another bottom RF shield here. We got 3 cables. We got this big blue cable. We got 2 controller cables, one on the side and one on the bottom here. We need to disconnect those. And you can very carefully grab a hold of these connectors and unplug them. Just rock them back and forth. Do not pull them straight down. Rock them carefully back and forth like so. Grab the whole bundle wire here. If you got a fingernail, you can pick it out, but it's easier to grab the whole bundle of wire and gently rock it back and forth, and it slips its way out. Once you do that, the bottom RF shield pops right off. Put that aside, and you got your main board here. Now, your connector is connected to the main board and needs to be taken off as well. So you hold the board with one hand after you discharge yourself, take the connector with the other, and gently rock it back and forth from side to side like this. Push that back, and then it should just pop right off. Just take your time as not to damage your board, and it should come right off. And there is your worn 72-pin connector. Set that aside. You got your main board. We're going to be cleaning up these contacts. These aren't dirty as dirty as these 72-pin contacts, but we're going to clean them anyway from sitting around being unused all those years. They might have some dust that should be cleaned off. This is your main board. You've got your main ROM chips on here. One controls graphics and the other one controls the programming. You got your RF box right here. This controls the power that's being fed to the components on your main board. You got your audio video, of course, and then you got your RF that carries audio video on the same line. These ROM chips are the ones I was speaking of that can be damaged if you touch them and discharge yourself on this main board. So you want to make sure that you discharge any electrostatic or static electricity that you may have built up in your body on something metal before you get started with this. I cannot stress that enough, because even with these older PCB boards, they can be damaged. Although they're built like tanks and last forever, they can be damaged. So as you see, Nintendo 1987 is when this was manufactured. NTSC, it's a US board, And then you got your CIC chip right here. I'll show a close-up and explain what the CIC chip is a little bit later. But for now, we're going to set this main board aside.